The black car did not belong on that road. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it. Cars like that, long, polished, with tinted windows that reflected the morning sky, did not come to streets like Maple Crescent, where the houses sat close together and the paint peeled in winter, and nobody bothered to fix it until summer came around again. But there it was, a black SUV, engine quiet, parked in front of the smallest house on the block. The neighbors came to their windows. One woman pulled back her curtain just enough to see. An older man stepped out onto his porch and pretended to check his mailbox, though there was nothing in it. Two children stopped their bicycles at the end of the driveway and stared. The doors of the SUV opened. 3 people stepped out. They were dressed in dark suits, and they moved with the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly where you are going. One of them held a folder. Another looked at a phone, then looked up at the house number above the door. They knocked. A moment passed. Then the door opened, and a young woman stood there in her work clothes, still holding a dish towel, her hair pulled back from her face. She looked at them and frowned slightly, the way you do when something unexpected happens before your first cup of tea is finished. "Is this the home of Adanna Ose?" one of them asked. She said yes. Her voice was careful. "We've been sent by Mr. Calloway," the man said. "He'd like to see you." Adanna did not know who Mr. Calloway was. She had never heard that name. She stood very still, the dish towel hanging from her hand, and she thought, "What did I do?" But the story did not begin there. It began 6 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning in October, when the cold had just started to mean it. Adanna Ose was 28 years old and worked the early shift at a laundry on Dundas Street called Fresh and Clean. It was not the kind of job she had planned for herself. She had planned for university, then a degree, then something with a title. But her mother had gotten sick 3 years ago, and plans had a way of becoming something you kept in a drawer and stopped looking at. The laundry was not a bad place. It smelled of warm cotton and detergent, and in winter the steam from the machines kept the whole shop comfortable. She arrived at 6 in the morning before the streetlights went off, and she sorted clothes and ran machines and folded things flat and pressed them neat. She was good at it. She was good at most things she put her hands to. Her boss, Mrs. Fenwick, was a short woman with reading glasses that she wore on top of her head, even when she did not need them. She ran the shop the way some people run their households, with a system for everything and very little patience for anything that disrupted the system. She was not cruel, but she was not warm either. She watched the clock the way a hawk watches a field. The other woman who worked the morning shift was called Renata. Renata was older, maybe 45, and she had worked at Fresh and Clean for 11 years. She knew every machine, every quirk, every customer by name. She also knew exactly who Mrs. Fenwick liked and who she didn't, and she used that knowledge carefully, the way some people use a key they're not supposed to have. Renata had never liked Adanna. She didn't say so outright. She was too smart for that. But it was there in the way she watched Adanna work, the way she sometimes paused a beat too long before answering a question, the way she smiled at Mrs. Fenwick a little more broadly whenever Adanna made a small mistake. Adanna had noticed it from the first week. She had decided not to make it her problem. That Tuesday in October, it was raining when Adanna left for work. Not the gentle rain of September, but the kind that meant what it said. Cold and steady and grey all the way down to the pavement. She pulled her coat tighter and walked fast, because the bus was unreliable and she did not want to be late. She was half a block from the laundry when she saw him. He was sitting on a bench at the bus stop. Not waiting, just sitting. He was old, maybe 70, maybe more, and he was wearing a coat that had once been good quality but was now thin at the elbows and dark with damp. He had a paper bag in his hands, and he was looking at it the way you look at something when you're not quite sure what to do next. Adanna slowed down. She glanced at him, then at the laundry, then at him again. She kept walking. She got to the door of the shop, put her hand on the handle, and stopped. Something in her chest felt off, the way your shoe feels when there's a small stone in it. Not enough to stop you, but enough that you notice every step. She turned around and walked back. "Sir," she said, stopping in front of him. "Are you all right?" The old man looked up. His eyes were dark brown and very clear, the kind of eyes that have seen a great deal and are not surprised by much anymore. He looked at her for a moment before he answered. "I am fine," he said. His voice was deep, and his accent had something underneath it that she couldn't quite place. "Thank you for asking." Adanna looked at the bag in his hands. "Have you eaten?" He paused. "Not yet today." She opened her bag. She had packed herself a lunch, a container of rice and stew that she had made the night before, enough for 2 meals. She had planned to eat half of it at break time. She held it out to him. He looked at it, then at her. "That is your food," he said. "I can eat later," she said. "There's a place near the shop." He took it slowly, as if he was not quite sure he should. "Why are you giving this to me?" She almost said something simple. "Because you're hungry, because it's raining, because I have more than you right now." But instead she said, "My mother used to say that a person who walks past someone cold and hungry has made a choice. I'm just trying to make a different one." The old man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What is your name?" "Adanna," she said. "Adanna," he repeated, the way people do when they are committing something to memory. "My name is Mr. Calloway." She did not know what that name meant. She smiled, told him to stay warm, and walked back to the laundry. She was 4 minutes late. Mrs. Fenwick looked at the clock, then at her. 4 minutes, Miss Fenwick said. "I know," Adanna said. "I'm sorry." She tied on her apron and got to work. The next morning, she left the house 10 minutes earlier. She had made an extra portion of food, just in case. She told herself she wasn't sure he would be there, but her feet already knew where they were going. He was there. Same bench, same coat, though today the rain had stopped, and the morning was pale and cold and still. He looked up when he heard her steps, and something in his face changed. Not much, but enough. She sat on the bench beside him and handed him the food. "You came back," he said. "I pass this way every morning," she said, which was true, though it wasn't the whole answer. They sat for a few minutes. He asked her about her work. She told him, briefly. He listened the way older people sometimes do, as if he had time, as if there was no rush, as if what she was saying mattered. When she got up to leave, she said, "I'll see you tomorrow if you're here." He nodded once, slowly. "I will be." She was halfway down the block before she let herself think, "I don't know anything about this man." She thought about that for one more step. Then she thought, it doesn't matter. She was right. It didn't. And later, she would understand why. This went on for nearly 2 weeks. Every morning, Adanna arrived at the bench. First, or he arrived to find her already there with the same container she washed and refilled the night before. They talked a little. About the neighborhood, about the weather, about small things. He never said much about himself. She did not push. Some people carry their stories carefully, and you have to wait to be invited in. One morning she arrived and found him not sitting but leaning. His back was against the metal frame of the bench, and his breath was coming in short pulls, shallow and fast. She sat down quickly. "Mr. Calloway, what's wrong?" "Just tired," he said. But the word tired didn't cover what his face was doing. She put her hand against his forehead without thinking. He was warm, the wrong kind of warm. "You have a fever," she said. "It'll pass," he said. "It won't pass by sitting on a cold bench," she said. She made a decision. She pulled out her phone, called the laundry, and told the person who answered that she needed to be late. The person who answered was Renata, who said nothing, which was worse than if she had said something. Adanna got Mr. Calloway to his feet slowly, one arm steady under his, and walked him 4 blocks to the walk-in clinic on College Street. She sat with him in the waiting room for an hour and 40 minutes. And when the doctor came out and said it was bronchitis, and that he needed medication and rest, she asked what the medications cost and paid for them at the pharmacy counter with the money she had set aside for her mother's prescription refill, which was not due until the following week. She told herself she would figure it out. She always did. When she finally walked into the laundry at 11 in the morning, Mrs. Fenwick was standing at the counter with her arms folded and her glasses on top of her head. "Family emergency," Adanna said before Mrs. Fenwick could speak. "That's twice this week you've been late," Mrs. Fenwick said. "I know. It won't happen again." Mrs. Fenwick looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "See that it doesn't," and went to the back. Renata watched Adanna tie on her apron without saying a word, but her eyes said plenty. 3 days later, Adanna arrived to find Mr. Calloway improved. He was sitting up straight, and when he saw her, he almost smiled. "Better," he said. Good, she said. She handed him his food. He took it and looked at her in that way he had. Careful, considered, like he was adding something up. You paid for my medication, he said. She had not told him. How did you know? The pharmacist mentioned the amount, he said. And I know what things cost. She looked away. It was fine. Was it, he asked. She didn't answer that. Adanna, he said. What are you giving up? She thought of her mother's prescription. She thought of the money she had been putting aside for a proper winter coat, because hers had started to let the cold through at the seams. She thought of the electricity bill she had been paying in installments. Nothing I can't manage, she said. He said nothing more, but his eyes, those clear dark eyes, held something she couldn't read. Not gratitude exactly, something quieter and more serious than gratitude. The next morning, he was not at the bench. She waited 5 minutes, then 10. Then she told herself that he was probably resting, which was what he was supposed to be doing. And she walked to work. But she thought about him all day. She thought about how she didn't know where he slept, or whether the medication was helping, or whether anyone else in the world was thinking about him at that same moment. She thought about her mother, who had been sick and scared and far from home once, and about the people who had stopped and helped, and the people who had walked past. She went back to the bench every morning for the rest of the week. He wasn't there. Renata had been watching. Adanna did not know this. She found out later. The way you find out things that have already done their damage. After the fact, when the information is something you can only hold and not change. Renata had seen her talking to the old man on the bench more than once. She had seen her bring food. She had followed her, one morning, at a distance and watched her sit with him in the cold, and she had taken photographs on her phone, the way someone does when they are building a case. On a Thursday, 2.5 weeks after Adanna had first given Mr. Calloway her lunch, Renata went to Mrs. Fenwick. Adanna was in the back, sorting a drop-off, when she heard Mrs. Fenwick say her name in the tone that meant, "Stop what you are doing and come here now." She came to the front of the shop. Mrs. Fenwick was standing behind the counter. Renata was beside her, very still, with her hands clasped in front of her and a small expression on her face that was not quite a smile but was close. "I want you to explain something to me," Mrs. Fenwick said. She turned Renata's phone toward Adanna. On the screen, Adanna sitting on the bench with Mr. Calloway. Adanna handing him a container of food. Adanna looked at the image. She looked at Renata. Then she looked at Mrs. Fenwick. "I was feeding someone who was hungry," she said. "With your work time," Mrs. Fenwick said. "On more than one occasion. While the shop was short-staffed, I was late by a few minutes. You were absent half a day," Mrs. Fenwick said, her voice rising just slightly. "You told me it was a family emergency. I helped someone who was sick. He had no one. He is not your responsibility," Mrs. Fenwick said. Adanna felt something shift inside her chest. She had known people like Mrs. Fenwick all her life. People who were not wrong, technically, and who used that technical correctness like a wall. "I understand," Adanna said. Her voice was very even. "What happens now?" Mrs. Fenwick straightened the papers on the counter. "I'm going to have to let you go," she said. "Effective today." Adanna took off her apron. She folded it neatly, the way she always did, and placed it on the counter. She picked up her bag from the back. She said good morning to no one in particular and walked out. The cold hit her the moment she stepped outside. She stood on the pavement for a moment, the street noisy around her, and she did not cry. She had learned not to cry in public a long time ago, when her mother was sick and she had to be the one who held things together. Crying was for later, for home, for the privacy of your own four walls. She walked home slowly. She had no job. She had spent the medication money from her savings. Her mother's prescription was due in 5 days. The electricity bill installment was due next week. Her coat was thin at the seams. She sat down on her bed and looked at the wall. Then she got up and started to cook, because she was going back to the bench in the morning, and she didn't know where else to begin. She looked for work for the next 2 weeks. She handed in applications, made phone calls, showed up in person when she could. The responses came back slowly, or not at all. She kept going back to the bench every morning, just in case, even though she hadn't seen Mr. Calloway in days. She didn't know why she kept going. Maybe because it was the one thing she had control over. Maybe because hope is stubborn even when it has no evidence. One morning, as she stood at the empty bench in the cold, she said quietly to the air, "I hope you're all right wherever you are." Then she turned up her collar and walked home. The call came on a Tuesday. Not a call, actually. A knock. She was washing dishes when she heard it, and she dried her hands on the dish towel and went to the door. 3 people in dark suits. One of them holding a folder. "Is this the home of Adanna Osei?" She said yes. "We've been sent by Mr. Calloway," the man said. "He'd like to see you." She stood very still. The name moved through her slowly, like something she had to find the right place for. "Is he all right?" she asked. "He is well," the man said. "He asked us to bring you to him, if you're willing." She was willing. They drove for nearly 2 hours, north of the city, through countryside that turned quieter and wider the further they went. Adanna sat in the back seat and watched the trees go past and thought, "I don't know where I'm going." And underneath that, "I'm going anyway." The car slowed at a long paved drive lined with bare October maples. At the end of the drive was a house, though house was perhaps not the right word for it. It was large and old and very still, the kind of place that has absorbed many seasons and is not surprised by any of them. They got out of the car. She followed them inside. The room they brought her to was a sitting room with tall windows that looked out at a garden, bare now but clearly tended. There were books on the shelves and a fire in the fireplace and 2 chairs by the window. In one of the chairs sat Mr. Calloway. He did not look like the man on the bench, or rather, he looked like him. The same clear, dark eyes, the same careful way of holding himself, but he was clean and warm and dressed in good clothes, and there was an ease about him that the bench had not shown her. He stood up when she came in. He was taller than she remembered. "Adanna," he said. She stopped a few feet away from him. She looked at him for a long moment. "You weren't actually homeless," she said. "No," he said, "I was not." She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "Tell me." He gestured to the other chair and she sat down and he sat across from her and he told her. His name was Bernard Calloway. He had built a logistics company over 40 years, starting with 1 truck and ending with a fleet that ran across 6 provinces. He had 3 children, all of them grown, all of them good people, but none of them interested in the business. He was thinking about the foundation he had been building for the past decade. A fund for skilled tradespeople and workers who had been displaced or underpaid. A thing he cared about more than the business now, more than almost anything. The foundation needed someone to run its outreach program, someone who understood what it was to work hard without recognition. Someone who did not need to be watched in order to do the right thing. Someone who kept showing up even when there was no reason left. He had spent 3 months, he told her, sitting in different parts of different cities, just watching. He had not found what he was looking for. Then he had come to her neighborhood and it had been raining and she had turned back. "You turned back," he said. "Most people don't." Adanna looked at the fire for a moment. Then she looked at him. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked. He named a salary that was more than she had ever made. He described the role, connecting with workers across the country, running grant programs, building community partnerships. He said there would be training. He said there would be support. He said the foundation had 3 staff members and needed a 4th who understood the ground level. She was quiet for a while. "Mr. Calloway," she said finally, "I need to be honest with you. I don't have a degree. I don't have management experience. I've been working laundry shifts for 2 years, and before that I was caring for my mother." "I know," he said. "You know. I made inquiries," he said, without apology. "After the clinic visit, I wanted to understand who you were." She sat with that for a moment. It should have felt intrusive, she thought, but somehow it didn't. It felt like being seen by someone who was paying attention. "What about the medication money?" she said. "I spent money I didn't have on your prescription. That will be returned to you," he said, with interest. She almost smiled. "That's not why I'm mentioning it." "I know it isn't," he said. "That's why it matters." She looked at her hands. She thought about her mother, who was doing better now, whose color had come back, and who had started keeping a small garden on the windowsill. She thought about the electricity bill, and the coat with the thin seams, and the applications she had sent out and not heard back from. She thought about the bench in the rain, and the choice she had made without thinking, the one her mother had told her to make. "I'd like to meet the other staff members," she said, "before I decide." Mr. Calloway nodded. "Of course, and I'll need a week. Take 2, he said. She looked at him. "You're very calm about this." "I've been calm about it since the morning you turned back," he said. "I've just been waiting for you to catch up." She took the week. She met the staff, 2 women and a man, all of them direct and genuine, and working on something that was clearly real. She read everything Mr. Calloway gave her about the foundation. She talked to her mother, who listened carefully and then said, "Adanna, when have you ever let fear make your decisions?" She called Mr. Calloway's office on a Friday afternoon. "Yes," she said. "Good," said the voice on the other end, calm as ever. 2 months later, on a Wednesday in December, Adanna walked into fresh and clean. She was wearing a new coat, proper wool, properly warm, with deep pockets and a collar that closed against the wind. She had her bag over her shoulder and she walked in the way she always had, without announcement or performance. Mrs. Fenwick was at the counter. She looked up when the door opened, and for a moment she didn't quite place the face. Then she did. Her expression shifted. She straightened her glasses. "Adanna," she said. "Good morning," Adanna said. Renata was folding at the back. She had gone very still. Adanna set a small envelope on the counter. Inside was a card from the Calloway Community Foundation, with her name on it and her title, Community Outreach Director. "I came to drop something off," Adanna said. "We're partnering with small businesses in the area to offer retraining grants for laid-off workers. I thought Fresh and Clean might want to be involved. You could nominate employees who've been let go and the foundation will cover skills upgrading." Mrs. Fenwick looked at the card. She looked at Adanna. "I see," she said. "You don't have to decide now," Adanna said. "Take the week. My number is on the card." She picked up her bag and turned toward the door. Then she stopped, the way she had stopped on that October morning 6 weeks before she walked back. She turned back. She looked at Renata, who was still very still at the back of the shop. "Renata," she said, not unkindly, "the grant covers anyone who's been displaced, even people who displace themselves. If they end up needing it, the offer is open." Renata said nothing, but something in her face moved. Adanna walked out into the cold December morning. The street was bright and sharp and full of people going somewhere. She pulled her coat around her and walked forward into all of it, carrying nothing heavy, owing nothing to anyone, and feeling, for the first time in a very long time, that the drawer where she kept her plans was finally open again.